We've already explored the world of Japanese airbrushes, American, German, and even Chinese airbrushes. But one corner of the airbrush world we haven't talked about yet is airbrushes from Taiwan. Taiwan has been producing airbrushes for decades, and while some of its brands may be less recognized compared to their Japanese counterparts, I believe the quality coming out of Taiwan is every bit as good, often on par with or even exceeding the more expensive Japanese options. Today, we are going to look at a Taiwanese airbrush that happens to be one of my personal favorites, the MadWorks Max-1. Not only that, some of you might remember that once upon a time, I mentioned I would be talking about, in my opinion, the best detail airbrush you can buy for the money. Well, the Max-1 is exactly the airbrush I was talking about, and I will explain why. Now, MadWorks isn't primarily known as an airbrush brand. MadWorks is a Taiwanese company best known for its high-quality hobby tools, particularly for Gundam modelers. They only recently entered the airbrush market, but they have brought the same dedication to detail and tool quality into their airbrushes. These are some of the least known airbrushes available today, and that honestly is what excites me the most. When you find an airbrush that feels like a diamond in the rough, hidden away from mainstream. The Max-1 is exactly that, an underappreciated gem waiting to be discovered. Let's begin, shall we? Some of you may have already recognized this model and thought, wait, isn't that a Sparmax SP20X? And you'll be absolutely right. The Max-1 and the Sparmax SP20X come from the same manufacturer, sharing the same exact build and engineering. Now, both are excellent detail airbrushes, no questions about it. But the MadWorks is a little bit better, and it comes down to one small but very important detail, which I will reveal shortly. So with that said, let's get into the spaghetti score. Number 1. Build quality. The MadWorks Max-1, like many of their brushes coming out of Taiwan today, is an absolute marvel when it comes to build quality. There is absolutely nothing about this airbrush that suggests it is in any way inferior to its Japanese cousins. In fact, they share many of the same strengths. The chrome finish is beautiful and impeccably done, very similar to what you would expect from top-tier Japanese brands. Across all of the Taiwanese airbrushes I own, including the Max-1, each one has arrived spotless, perfectly machined, and ready to go straight out of the box. The nozzles are precisely engineered, sitting perfectly in the center of the air cap hole, which is exactly what you want to see in a high-quality airbrush. Now, just like Japanese airbrushes, the chrome inside the cap does begin to fade pretty quickly. Nothing unusual there. What I do love, however, is the fact that the paint cap is removable and replaceable, adding flexibility and longevity to the tool. Taking all this into consideration, I'll give it a 10 out of 10. Number 2. Aesthetics. This is honestly the lowest score I will give to this airbrush. Visually, the Max-1 is not attractive or eye-catching in any way. It has a very generic look. I will even say generic among generic airbrushes. But you know what? That's actually part of its charm. The Max-1 is so low-key and stealthy that you will not give it a second look. It doesn't scream, "Hey, I'm one of the most amazing detail airbrushes you can buy." It just quietly exists, ready to perform without needing to show off. And because of that understated, almost invisible aesthetic, I've developed a strange appreciation for it. It's stealthy, humble, and all about function over form. Still, compared to its German or American counterparts, it simply can't compete in visual appeal. I'll give aesthetic a 5 out of 10. Number 3. Ergonomics. In terms of feel, the MadWorks Max-1 sits nicely in the hand. The balance is slightly front-heavy, mostly because of the larger paint cup. That said, the cup is swappable, and it will fit either Iwata or other Steamback 2ml B cups without any issue. Unfortunately, those don't come in the package. The airbrush only ships with a 7ml cup, which is fine, but it does add a bit of weight towards the front. The handle itself has a good feel, though I would not say there is anything particularly special about it. The body is comfortable, it does the job well, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with the ergonomics here, but at the same time there is nothing that makes it stand out. I'll give it ergonomics an 8 out of 10. Number 4. Spray control. Now, this is where I finally talk about the difference between the MadWorks Max-1 and the Sparmax SP20X, and why I said earlier that the Max-1 is just a little bit better. As I mentioned, both airbrushes share the same body, the same construction, the same platform, but there is one very important detail that sets the Max-1 apart: the needle. Under the microscope, you can clearly see the difference. Compared to the SP20X, the Max-1 needle has a much finer, much pointer tip. Now, this is a very subtle difference in performance. It's not a huge change, but it's notable enough to me. Both airbrushes start releasing paint at the same time, but with the Max-1, the initial paint flow is gentler and more gradual. The SP20X, by contrast, releases more paint with the same trigger pull. This extra refinement gives the Max-1 an advantage in control and range. It's simply easier to stay within shapes, manage transition, and maintain precision while moving across a model. Working with the Max-1 is an absolute pleasure. It makes detail work feel effortless. I can only give spray control a perfect 10 out of 10. It is truly amazing. Number 5. Trigger response. The trigger response of the MadWorks Max-1 is excellent. As soon as you begin to pull back, the airbrush immediately starts to initiate paint flow. The release is subtle. It never feels abrupt or overly intense. Instead, it's gentle, controlled, smooth, and predictable. Overall, it's a very confident airbrush. For that, I gave trigger response a strong 9 out of 10. Number 6. Atomization. Another real strength of the MadWorks Max-1 is its atomization. This airbrush produces a very low air velocity, right in line with the likes of an Iwata Micron. At 25 psi, I recorded an air velocity of 4.1 meters per second at a distance of 4 inches. Basically almost identical to the performance of a .18 custom Micron. This tells you immediately that the Max-1 is meant to operate at a low pressure. And that's exactly how I use it, just like I will use a Micron. Now, the way I judge atomization performance is very specific. I based it on how an airbrush performs between 12 and 15 psi. That's the range where I give it the score because, at least in my case as a miniature painter, most of the detail work I do with an airbrush is done at the pressure range. And in that range, the Max-1 produces some of the finest atomization out there. The spray is soft, refined. It lays down paint with a powder fine mist. Perfect to create smooth gradients and an even distribution that makes detail and shading work effortless. Taking all that into consideration, I'll give it a 9 out of 10. Number 7. Versatility. Of course, the MadWorks Max-1 is first and foremost a detail airbrush, and it runs a very low air velocity. Still, I have no problem doing the majority of my work with it. Where it really falls short is in the more heavy-duty aspects of miniature painting, things like priming or heavy base coating. If you thin your paint enough, you can base coat with it, and it will still perform, but honestly, I would not recommend it, unless it's your last resort. It's just not built as an all-around workhorse. I'll give Versatility a 7 out of 10. Number 8. Precision Reach. Now, this is another area where I'm going to make a direct comparison with the Sparmax SP20X. For my usual test, I take a stick that I mark at 1.5 inches and attach it to the airbrush. I know this is a very rudimentary way of performing the test, but it allows me to keep a fixed, realistic distance from the surface of the page as I start drawing lines. More importantly, it's always consistent across all the airbrushes I test, which makes my comparison accurate and fair. So why 1.5 inches? Because for me, as a miniature painter, this is a realistic working distance. I often find myself having to work around the model at awkward angles. So precision at this kind of range is one of the single most important aspects of a detail airbrush. How narrow and controlled the spray pattern remains at a distance. First, with the SP20X, the results are excellent. It keeps a tight spray pattern even at 1.5 inches. The SP20X has always been an amazing detail airbrush, and it shows here. Then I repeated the test with the Max-1. And here is where things get exciting. The lines are slightly tighter than those from the SP20X. It's a subtle difference, but it's there. The Max-1 is capable of producing an even finer, more precise spray pattern at a distance due to the finer needle. To really put this into perspective, I compare it to an Iwata custom Micron with a .18 nozzle. The Micron is legendary for its precision, keeping an unbelievably tight spray pattern even at a distance. But when I ran the same test with the Max-1, just judge for yourself. I can't tell the difference. The Max-1 was just as good at producing fine lines, just as the Micron. I mean, this airbrush costs only $67. Just the nozzle of a custom Micron cost $54, almost the entire price of the Max-1 itself. And yet nobody talks about it. I really think the Precision Reach is a perfect 10 out of 10. Number 9. Price to performance ratio. As I've already mentioned, this airbrush costs $67 on newtype.com. Yes, I truly believe this is the best detail airbrush you can buy for the money. But here's the thing. I don't think you should buy this airbrush because it's cheap. You should buy it because of its amazing performance. It just happens to be offered at an incredible price point. And honestly, if after everything I've said so far, you don't think this airbrush deserves a perfect score here, then I clearly didn't do a good job with this review. For me, this one is obvious. 10 out of 10. Number 10. Is it good for beginners? I will say yes. Of course, with a 0.2mm detail airbrush, there is always going to be a bit of a learning curve. You need to be more careful with paint dilution, and you'll have to practice to get the most out of it. But here is the thing. The performance of this airbrush is so good that it will actually make the learning process much more pleasant and rewarding. It will help you build confidence as you go, because the tool responds exactly the way you need to. I give beginner friendliness an 8 out of 10. Let's bring it all together, and the MadWorks Max-1 gets a total spaghetti score of 86 out of 100, making the Max-1 the highest rated airbrush I've reviewed so far. A true diamond in the rough. You know, I actually bought this airbrush without putting too much thought into it. When it arrived, I didn't even try for a few weeks. Honestly, I didn't think much of it. But when I finally did, I was in shock. The performance completely blew me away. That was the moment I started to look more into what MadWorks is doing. Up until now, their lineup has mostly consisted of models shared with Sparmax. But recently, they released their first proprietary designs, the MadWorks GM00 and the GM01, which I believe were built to compete directly with the Iwata Eclipse, since they share a very similar concept when it comes to the air assembly and the nozzle design. I'll eventually cover those in another review. Also, MadWorks is working on a 0.2 detail airbrush prototype. I'm very excited for that one. And you can bet I'll be reviewing it when it's ready, so let's wait and see what happens. But for now, if you enjoyed this video, leave it a like and subscribe. And join me in the pursuit to become the fastest airbrush slinger in the West. Hey!